made a very similar video to this back in the Splatoon 2 days as a YouTube short. But my audience has grown more than tenfold since then, and this is a situation that keeps coming up in lessons, so I figure it's time for a little bit of a revisit on this topic. And I'm talking about optimizing your painting. A lot of people paint in ways that are inefficient, that don't put down as much paint as you can given the amount of time you have, and it holds them back both in terms of movement and in terms of getting special and in terms of gaining combat advantages that you get from having ink on the ground. So I want to talk starting from, kind of the least efficient methods and improving them bit by bit until we get up to the most efficient methods, and we can talk about the use cases for those. So the first thing that I tend to see from beginner players is they're just going to hold down the ZR button and move ahead. Now the problem with this is that the only new paint that they're adding is what's right at the front of this tip of ink. There is not a lot that is actually being added. Most of the paint that is going down is landing on top of this line that we already have painted. So that's no good. We're wasting most of this paint that we're putting down by putting it over something that didn't need to be painted a second time. Also, moving this way is very slow. If all you're trying to do is move forward in a straight line, there's still a faster way to do that, which is to paint a solid line first, swim to the end of it, and then paint another solid line. If you're starting from spawn and trying to move into mid as fast as possible, for example, to pop the Rainmaker shield, this is the way that you want to be doing that, because this will put down a lot of paint for you to swim through to let you swim for a long time, swimming being the fastest method of movement that you have in this game, and it maintains that swimming for as long as you can possibly have it. So that's the optimal idea for moving forward. You just never want to be just walking forward and holding ZR in a movement or painting situation. If you're in combat, if somebody's fighting you and you're trying to aim at them, if you miss too many shots, you want to be moving again. You don't want to be standing still and doing this. This is what I call walk-and-shoot syndrome. So even in combat, you don't want to just be walking and holding down the ZR button, because people will outmaneuver you and make you miss. As soon as you miss any shots, you want to be repositioning and getting your aim back on. So you want to be swimming, for example. If you need to paint your feet, because, of course, a lot of people do this because it paints their feet and allows them to swim quickly. A faster way to get your feet painted than to wait until that splotch appears at my feet is to just aim directly at my feet and then aim back up. And so you end up doing something like this. And while this isn't faster than painting a full line and then swimming through it in terms of movement speed, it is a faster way to get you moving at max speed and potentially connecting you to a larger body of your ink, and also leaving you up and firing in this slower, more visible state for less time, and making you less vulnerable in the process. So, again, if you're finding yourself holding down the ZR button and just walking, especially walking straight forward, that is almost never the most efficient thing for you to be doing. Now, we can improve this in a couple of ways, and we'll talk about 3 such ways that are optimal for certain uses. This first one is the most situational. I'm going to pop a special right now just so you can see the special gauge on it. But the first use case is you play basically the same way, except instead of just aiming straight forward, you aim left and right and go back and forth like this. Now, this left and right painting method like this, which is often improved by jumping, because jumping causes your shots to be more random and therefore fly in more different places more quickly. This method is actually really fast for farming special. You would see a lot of Splattershot Junior players in Splatoon 2 days who needed armor really quickly doing that sort of thing to get special gauge as fast as they possibly could. But you'll also notice that this is really not great for movement. In front of me, sure, it works in this scenario, but off to the side, not really. It's actually a very predictable path that I have to take if I want to swim smoothly through this. So this is not ideal for a lot of use cases. This is not ideal for your teammates to be able to use this paint to move around in. This is purely, you have a special that you want really, really quickly, and that's the only thing you care about, getting paint out of this spot. So, we're not going to use that super often. One method that we are going to use fairly often is the rectangle method, which is simply, instead of walking forward and only getting new paint at the very far edge of our trail, we're going to walk sideways. And this will continuously bring us to new turf to be painted, but this time, instead of a line that's this wide, we're getting a line that is this wide, and that is a much more significant improvement. Now, one disadvantage of this method is that there are these splotches in the middle that can make it a little bit more awkward to swim through. This isn't ideal for movement, and so we're not going to just use the rectangle method. We're going to add one slight alteration that makes a massive improvement to it. And that is going to be that we're just going to move our aim up and down. This takes advantage of the way that our weapon aims, because remember, if we aim straight down at the floor, a shot will definitely land at our feet. And so what we're doing as we aim from up to down is first we're aiming far away, and then we're aiming closer to us, and then we're aiming closer to us, and we're just filling in this whole line so that every single shot counts towards filling the line and none of them are redundant. So it's going to look like this. And you can see there are a few blips here and there. Part of that is my own inefficiency with using the technique, but this is still a massive improvement over the spotty stuff that we had before. So this improved rectangle method with the up-down aiming is one of the more optimal ways to paint up part of the map. If you find an area that's sectioned off into a rectangle specifically, this is a phenomenal method to use for filling that entire area relatively quickly. Now, if you have a really wide open space and you're trying to move forward and keep getting more ink to paint as you go, the rectangle method isn't completely optimal, because once you run out of space in this rectangle, you're just going to hit a wall and you're going to have to maybe swim forward all the way to the edge of the rectangle to get another rectangle to paint, or you're going to have to find someplace else completely, which is what happens more often than not on the way that a lot of the maps are laid out. So one way to get a little bit more efficient than that is to take the rectangles and just turn them diagonally. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn 45 degrees, do a rectangle in this direction, and then we're going to just turn and do a rectangle in this direction, and then we're going to turn and do a rectangle in the other direction. And you can see that as soon as we get to the end of our rectangle, we can just turn and have another rectangle ready to go. And you can kind of adapt that to whatever terrain that you're moving towards. So this ran me into a corner, but if I instead decide to start going in this direction, then I can turn in this direction, and then I can turn in this direction, and I don't corner myself, and I get to just keep going for the entire duration. And the entire time I'm moving forward. Rather than just going the length of one rectangle and then having to stop, I've been able to swim clear across the training room using this method. So this is a method that is very often optimal. Again, it depends heavily on the map geometry and on what needs to be painted. So for example, if there's a big area that's very rectangular and easy to paint, but you already control it, that might not be the way that you're going for there. But this will give you some much better options to try and piece together like a jigsaw puzzle to get the best painting you can for the situation you're in and the task that you're trying to complete, whether that be moving for combat, painting up for combat for your team to move around and use, or just painting for special.